Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's program on AI, skills and career growth, what it takes to lead in today's HR landscape. This event, it's part of the SHRM webinar series. You can learn about upcoming and on-demand events from our e-newsletters and the webinar homepage. SHRM thanks Eightfold AI for sponsoring this program and our series of free webinars for the HR community. Before you hear from today's presenters, we want to first provide you with some guidance on using the SHRM webinar interface. In the center of your screen, you should see the title slide for this presentation. To the right of your screen is where you'll be able to submit questions to our presenters or to our webinar tech support team if you are having any issues viewing the program. In your session agenda, you can access and download the presentation slides, as well as some additional resources our presenters have made available to you. Please click on the Read More tab in your session agenda to access those resources. After this program, you'll receive an email with the SHRM recertification code. Likewise, viewing this full program qualifies for 1 PDC towards SHRM CP and SHRM SCP recertification. You can claim the program for other kinds of HR recertification credit, but you'll need to provide the program's details to your certifying body. We only have that pre-approval code for SHRM certification. And now, a little about today's program. The CHRO role is evolving beyond traditional HR responsibilities. Today's CHROs are key business leaders shaping talent strategies, technology investments, and broader organizational decisions. But how do HR professionals rise to this level, and what separates top performing CHROs from the rest? In this webinar, our presenters will unpack key insights from the Josh Bersin company's latest report, Understanding the Path to CHRO. Guiding today's program are Kathi Enderes and Rebecca Warren. Kathi Enderes is a senior vice president and industry analyst at the Josh Bersin company, supporting clients and the market with evidence-based insights on all areas HR, learning, talent, and HR technology. Ms. Enderes has more than 20 years global experience for management consulting with IBM, PwC, and EY, and as a talent leader at McKesson and Kaiser Permanente. Most recently, she led talent and workforce research at Deloitte. Ms. Enderes is a frequent keynote speaker, author, and thought leader. Rebecca Warren has been at Eightfold for 4 years, starting in customer success, where she helped build the team. She moved over to marketing in 2024 and is now a director of talent-centered transformation. Prior to Eightfold, she was in TA leadership for 20 plus years in large retail, CPG, agribusiness, and restaurant organizations. She is a connector, an ideator, a strategist, and a storyteller. With introductions complete, I'm pleased to turn the webinar microphone over to our first presenter, Rebecca Warren, to get today's program underway. Over to you, Rebecca.
All right. Hey, everyone. Super excited to be here. Kathi, great to be on another webinar with you. We always have so much fun. Are we ready to do this?
I'm ready to do it. So looking forward to this, Rebecca.
Okay. So you've already had the overview about what we're going to talk about, right? What the CHR role is and isn't, where it's going, what's happening. So Kathi and I are going to spend some time talking about what that shift looks like, talking about systemic HR, talking about different paths to the CHRO space, why having experience outside of HR might be your secret weapon, and how AI and talent intelligence can help you personalize your own development, as well as closing skill gaps, finding mentors, and giving you a roadmap forward. So we have a ton to cover. Kathi, are we ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So we're going to first kick off what's happening in the world. Kathi, it's wild out there. What in the world is happening in this space today? Let's go to that next slide and talk about our economic and workforce environment, which I think is slapping us all a little bit in the face right now.
Yeah, and I think the question would be what's not happening right now rather than what's happening, because a lot is happening. But the way that we think about it is there's really 4 big themes that are happening. And I see we have kind of a global audience, which is great, around the world, really. So this is not just the US kind of issue or theme. These are all global themes. So the first one has to do with that's hitting every single one of us, whether we're in HR or talent acquisition or leadership development or learning, is the labor market. So the labor market in many places around the world, including the US and many places in Europe too, is kind of really imbalanced, or we call it dislocated. And what we mean by that is, in some pockets, in some areas, in some roles, we have incredible shortages, like healthcare, for example, frontline leadership roles, manufacturing, hospitality. If you've traveled lately, you see that hospitality, also transportation, airlines, for example, just don't have enough people in many of the frontline roles, while in more of the white collar roles, there's layoffs, there's kind of reductions, certainly also in some of the HR roles. So we see this kind of really imbalanced labor market that's impacting us in HR and in talent acquisition. Second one has to do with the businesses. So every business is transforming and disrupting and kind of merging with other industries. The CEO report from PwC lately said that 54% of CEOs around the world, and this was a global study of over 4,000 CEOs, said 54% of them say that they don't think their business is going to even exist in 10 years. So many businesses are going to be completely disrupted. They need to change their products, their operating model, their offerings, and are really being disrupted in every single industry. And we see this also in our global workforce intelligence study that we do together with Eightfold, where we just recently studied automotive manufacturing, for example. High level of disruption there, but then also in banking, and we're doing insurance now. So all these industries are getting really disrupted and have to change how they operate. And at the heart of all of this, and I can't believe we've talked for 7 minutes and not mentioned AI, but now we're going to mention AI, of course, because
here we are.
Here we are. This is on everybody's mind, how AI is impacting the HR function, but then also impacting every single role, every single job, service delivery models, operating models. And what does this mean for us in HR and talent to deal with this AI disruption? How do we think about this AI disruption? How do we prepare the workforce? How do we redesign jobs? How do we reskill? How do we find new people? So this AI disruption is not just a technical thing. It's really, most importantly, it's around people. And this is why we introduced this concept of the super worker. So where we see here this report, The Rise of the Super Worker, where we are talking about how every employee can actually become what we call a super worker with much higher productivity, much higher kind of performance, and also much more meaningful work if we use AI, right? So a very positive concept, but an also very human-centered concept around AI. So it's not just about the tech, it's really about what we do with the technology. And the last one has to do with employees. So employee engagement around the world actually is at an all-time low. It's dropped for the first time in a few years. And employees are very stressed. They're very worried. They're worried about AI. They're worried about their job going away. They're worried if they're ready for AI, and they want to have more say in the company as well. So for us, that means how can we give employees better careers, more control over their own destiny, more control over designing their own future, their job, and their work at the company. So all of this makes what we're doing in HR and the CHRO role really, really complex.
And really important, right? Like all of these things are happening. We can't drop the ball on any of them. We can't boil the ocean, but how do we think about what this means for organizations? Like I am right now at a conference with TA and TM leaders. So thanks for my fancy background hotel here. And we've been talking about that. What does that mean for alignment, for transparency, for innovation, right? We spent some time talking yesterday about how innovation is critical, but yet with all of these things happening, it's really hard to know even how to start, where to do that. So like when we're thinking about all of these things, what does that mean for organizations and for HR when we've got all of these priorities that maybe seem like they're competing with each other and maybe not aligned.
Yeah, and the role of HR really has completely shifted. So HR needs to not just think about kind of the old school kind of HR things like hiring, training, compensation, payroll, but other things like redesigning work, for example, redesigning jobs, redesigning organizational models, business models, as we just talked about. So not 54% of the biggest world's largest companies go out of business in 10 years. So redesign of these operating models and every single job, using AI for that. How do you do that? So that's something that we as HR oftentimes haven't been thinking about, haven't been involved, but who else would do it, right? So that's one of these big priorities that helps organizations thrive in this new world of AI. How do we create more dynamic talent models, not just static talent models, and drive what we call talent density. So talent density is actually a really important concept. It means that oftentimes or sometimes small companies are actually higher performing than big companies, because when you grow a company, a lot of times you add complexity, you add bureaucracy, and you also don't consider that every new hire actually needs to add to the capability of the entire team, of the entire organization. So Netflix actually was the company that introduced the concept of talent density, because they always look for every single new hire. Does this new hire actually grow the company's capabilities, or is it more something that a manager wants to do, maybe because they say, oh, we have too much to do? And do you need to hire somebody? Or can you think about a different concept of maybe going outside of the company, maybe have a contractor, a consultant, or something like that? And is the person that you want to hire actually going to add to what the team can do? Or are they going to, in the end of the day, actually increase complexity of the business? So that kind of concept of really thinking about every single person, not hiring to grow, but growing the company in order to hire. So hiring only after you basically have the need and already feel the need. And that's kind of why some of the companies are much more high performing, smaller companies a lot of times.
Exactly. Well, when you tie every hire to an organizational goal, it changes the game, right? Not just like you said, what a hiring manager wants, but what actually is going to drive the business forward. And it also gives then that new hire a purpose. Like, hey, I have a connection to this company being successful, as opposed to I'm hired to work for Bill or Sally.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And really, I mean, you said it so well, because I think a lot of times when we're hiring people, we're thinking about activities, but what's the ultimate goal that this person has to accomplish, right? Why are they here? What are the outcomes? So it changes your kind of job descriptions too, and your requisitions from more the activity-based things. It also goes to this concept of skill-based hiring, of course, and skill-based overall talent management, learning and all of that, because when you tie it less to activities and more to actual goals, what are the skills and capabilities you need to actually accomplish those? So all of this factors into kind of this item number 2 that we have here, creating this kind of dynamic talent model for talent density, where we move people around as well, and make sure that people have kind of opportunities for growth within the company, not just hiring from the outside all the time. So this is a really important concept that changes actually the game on how you traditionally maybe do HR. The third one has to do with leadership models, culture, employment, brand. So thinking about what do you need actually from a leadership perspective, from a kind of learning and growth mindset culture in order to adopt AI, for example. We're just talking with a very large manufacturing company that's one of our clients, and they told us they have AI training, mandatory AI training for their entire workforce. They basically break it out between frontline manufacturing employees, professionals and leaders, and they get different AI training, because the frontline employees, for example, get lots of the robotics and all of that. Or professionals have to learn much more about generative AI and AI agents, and leaders have to learn much more about how they inspire their teams actually to experiment and to try and to kind of grow with AI. But then they also have, from a culture perspective, they have mandatory training on growth mindset and experimentation and kind of those kind of more cultural environments, because in the AI world, of course, we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know how it's going to happen. So all of this has to do with kind of a different set of leader, a different culture, and creating this kind of really engaging employment brand. So that's number 3. Number 4 has to do, and we'll talk more about that, the shift to systemic, what we call systemic HR. And systemic HR is a different mindset of HR that moves HR from this kind of efficient service delivery function to a problem-solving consulting kind of organization that helps the business solve these biggest business problems, like the problems we just saw on the first slide that we talked about. And the last one has to do with the tech stack. So HR people right now and CHROs can't just not be conversant in technology, in HR technology, and understanding what AI agents do, what AI assistants can do for them, how it changes their HR technology stack. It didn't used to be like that. You could maybe outsource this to your IT department, but now it's so ingrained and so part and parcel of the entire HR organization that CHROs have to be, and HR leaders have to be conversant in technology and understand how it works on a high level. So all of this is going on, and it really changes the requirements of CHROs, of HR leaders.
Yeah, and when I think about all the things that you said are moving from the front of the process to the bigger picture, right? Like, it's not necessarily about hiring for tasks. It's not even about hiring based on someone's resume. It's hiring on potential, the work that needs to get done, right? If you think about, hey, here's the end goal, and you figure out how to get there, right? We all may approach things differently. So it's not about being very specific about the work. It's about what work needs to get done, and let's go do that. And even if we do it in different ways, sometimes that makes us, I think, better if we approach things differently instead of following a linear roadmap. Like, it's wild, it's crazy. We need to get this done. And if we do the same things we've always done, we're going to get the same outcomes we've always gotten, right? And that's not going to get us to where we need to go.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And so to sum it all up, what we actually see happening here is that organizations have to move to what we call systemic HR. And systemic HR is not just a new operating model, although the operating model that we've had in HR for 30 years needs redesign as well, because if you think what 30 years ago in the mid-90s, well, we didn't even have the internet, right? We certainly didn't have AI. We didn't even have mobile phones. So lots have changed in our lives,
I don't
right?
even know what to say to that. I don't even know how to think about that, how to not have all the things we have today. It wasn't that long ago when we were operating on fax machines and snail mail.
That's right. No, exactly. And phones, of course, right? And so if that's how old the HR operating model is, it needs to be redesigned. It needs to be reimagined. So we need to think about a different HR operating system. We call it an operating system, like a phone operating system, where you need different skills and capabilities of the HR team. The organizational structure of HR changes. The service delivery model changes. You have much more cross-functional teams, much less silos, and also much less silos between HR and the business as well. So rotating people in and out of the business, really, really important as well. Rotating people within HR across different business units. And I will tell you the most high-performing CHROs always think about that. How can they place people from the business into their HR organizations, and how can they place people from HR into the business? So, for example, Lauren Schuster, he's the CHRO of the Lego Group. He comes from a marketing background, so he is not a career HR person, and I know we're going to talk about that, but he always rotates people. For example, and he told us that when we talked with him, he rotates people from recruiting into sales, for example, from the IT organization into people analytics. So that kind of cross-pollination between the business and HR, critically important as well. So that's really going on here. And the profession itself is extremely complex and extremely high value. So here you see, and I'm obviously not going to go through all of this, our 96 capabilities in 20 capability areas of our HR capability model that we have at the Josh Bersin company. And we have even and we'll talk about this a little bit later, we have a capability assessment where every HR professional can assess yourself against that. So you can assess yourself against that. And then you can see where you want to grow. So you could say, maybe I'm not that strong in things like workforce planning, for example, and maybe I want to grow there because that's going to be a really important consideration. Or maybe I want to be stronger in HR tech and service delivery and in those kind of areas. So it really helps you understand your kind of overall, what we call full stack HR capabilities that you can have. And from an HR tech stack, and I know I talked a little bit about that, we're not going to dive too deep in that, but things are going to change a lot too. When you're thinking about AI agents, the whole way that our employees and our contractors and our applicants, our candidates, interface with HR technology will change a lot with these agents. So right now you have most of the interface with HR technology. If you're, for example, applying for a job, usually you have to go to a website. It's still, for the most part, very similar. It's clunky, and it's not kind of how you have your consumer experience when you go to buy something, for example, a very different experience. And I think these agents will really change that a lot. So people will interface much more with these agents that just ask them, what do you want to do? And how can I help you? And then you just basically talk with this agent, even in voice controlled or typing in, and it helps you do what you have to do. So you don't have to work through these still clunky and old school interfaces as well. And in the middle of all of this is, of course, talent intelligence. And I know Eightfold has this great talent intelligence platform where you get insights on people's skills, their capabilities, but then also on the labor market and on your competitors, and inside and outside data that you can use within HR to create a better candidate experience, a better employee experience, but then also get better hires, get more performance for your people, improve their overall kind of work life, and redesign those jobs as well. So all of this is happening in the world of HR as well. So I think, Rebecca, do you want to go to our first poll?
We're ready for a poll. Tony, can you help us out here? So we are talking about how prepared is your organization to shift from traditional HR to a more systemic, strategic HR model. We've got a couple of options for you, so feel free to pick the one that is closest to you. There are no right or wrong answers. We want to hear what's actually happening in your org today. So are you leading the way, all systemic and strategic? Are you on the path? Good progress, more to do? There's always more to do. Just starting, early stages of the transition, mostly traditional, little progress so far, or we think we want to make the shift, but we don't even know where to start. And that was a lot of the conversations hearing at this conference that I'm at Conseiro conference around what does that look like? And a lot of folks, I will say, at Eightfold, maybe we get a little bit comfortable with AI. We're like, of course, AI is here. It's great. We love it. Here's how we use it. But not everybody is on that same page, whether you're an employee or whether you're a leader. And there's a lot of questions. We talk about having to be agile, and you can't have a 5-year plan because we have no idea what's going to happen, right? And so there's a lot of folks, every day. And there's a lot of folks who have a lot of questions about that. And so that continuation of talking about it, making sure folks understand what it is, what it isn't, and even those baby steps, right? You can have a really big plan. Taking some of those little steps sometimes is the way to start. So, okay, do we think we've had enough time to let folks weigh in? Kathi, anything you want to add before we go to results?
I think so. No, I think we're ready. I think let's see where everybody's at.
Tony, what do we have? Ooh, I love this crowd, Kathi. They are rocking it. Oh, wait, it's flipped. Okay. It's opposite.
No, it's just basically sorted by I think frequency. So starting early stages of the transition, mostly traditional, little progress. Okay. Well, and I will tell you, and I think we can go to the next slide here if we can. Okay, there we go. most organizations are also not there. So as
Yeah.
you look at our maturity model, and we have had over 1,000 organizations actually participate in this big study that we had done. So this is a very broad data set. Most of them are also in this kind of early stage what we call transactional compliance. Only 11% are these like really problem oriented, operating like a consulting firm, really data-based, insights focused HR organization, because it's challenging, right? Because it's challenging to kind of build up that capability as well. So let me talk
about it from trying to move the Titanic or an iceberg, right?
Yes.
Like it's nothing that happens quickly, and it takes time and energy and effort, and sometimes it's a slog. Let's be honest, right? But it needs to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, it absolutely needs to happen. And it impacts the CHRO role as well. So the CHRO role, let's talk about this most senior HR leader. Many organizations call it the chief people officer, or chief HR officer, some call it the chief culture and experience officer, whatever you call it, basically. This role is changing a lot too. So this comes from a study that actually we're in the middle of, but we've also studied kind of the profiles of 20,000 CHROs around the world, and then correlated the profiles against our systemic HR model to see what the high-performing CHROs are doing. Many of these CHROs that actually we interviewed and we queried and we surveyed ourselves as well, this is how they describe the role of the CHRO. So you see multifaceted, challenging as kind of the biggest words, strategic, transformational, partnering, leader, architect, complicated. So you see a lot of these kind of words that indicate how it has evolved, really. I love this quote from one of the CHROs that we interviewed, and actually we have a great podcast with him, Jörg Dörsch. He feels that the CHRO role has evolved from this really operational support function, from a rule enforcer role to a strategic leadership role. And I think that's what we're seeing in this CHRO and also in the systemic HR study as well. So really a big shift of focus of what the CHRO role looks like.
And I love, I'm looking at the word cloud here. I love also seeing courageous, architect, right? Really developing it from the ground up and having to be maybe a little more forceful than maybe HR has been in the past, right? Maybe it's much less of a rule enforcer or compliance or event planning, and sometimes sticking your neck out, saying, "Hey, pay attention! Hello, we're here!" Right? So that courage, I think, happens a lot in this seat to say, "Hey, this is important."
No, absolutely. I mean, I talked with a CHRO who has been in many different kind of tech companies here in the Silicon Valley where I live, and she said she always has to put her neck out in things that she cares about. So she talked about the return to office, for example. I know many of you are in the middle of all of this, and she has said, I had to tell my CEO and my leadership team who all said, we have to come back to the office. And I brought the data, I brought the insights. I told them basically, we'll lose people. And she said, I really had to stand up for what I knew was right. And luckily they listened, but sometimes people might not listen. And so how do you stand up for what you know it's right for the business and for your people as well? So, and many of these questions come up all the time. I know return to office is just one of them that impacts many of the CHROs right now.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a really big consideration. Meanwhile, this is a study from Stanford that the CHRO is becoming more highly elevated. So they saw that over the last 15 years or so, or actually more than that, last 30 years, the CHRO role has actually been evolving and being elevated from kind of, and they looked at the top 5 most highly paid executives on the C-suite of Fortune 500 companies or S&P Global companies, maybe. And they saw that it used to be only less than 1%, so a half percentage point in 1992. And then now in 2022 is when they completed the study, it was 13%. So like more and more, the CHRO gets to be on par in terms of pay with the CFO, with the CIO. with the chief marketing officer maybe. So being in the top paid ranks really shows also how much they're valued by the CEO as well. And we see this also in like many of the CHROs that we talk with also expand their portfolio. So we see CHROs, for example, that the CHRO of Moderna, for example, Tracy Franklin, that like drug development company, pharmaceutical company, she now also has all of digital under her portfolio. So all of the digital tech, because she says for us, it's not just the human people, but it's basically the technology resources as well. So she sees AI agents, the AI workers basically are managed also under her portfolio, which is a really big theme. I mentioned Lauren Schuster, for example. He has also marketing and communications in addition to HR. And Tanush, who is the CHRO of Standard Chartered Bank, for example, she also has business strategy under her portfolio. So, and there's many examples of that. So many of these like CHROs have a broader, more expansive role now that include HR, but include other areas. And it really shows the trust that the CEOs have in these CHROs here as well.
So let me ask you a question on this. Love that the percentage went from 0.5% to 13%, but how should we feel about 13% right now? Should we feel good about that? I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, I think the progress is good, right? And you have to think about that. Oftentimes or sometimes the senior most HR person sometimes isn't even a C-suite person. And we actually see this in our survey and in our study too, that sometimes, although they might be called the chief people officer, but when you ask them, are you actually on the executive committee? Are you actually participating in the same way as the CFO? Sometimes the answer is no, right? So, and it didn't used to be like that. It used to be actually most of the time, it used to be that HR was not at the table. We always talk about the seat at the table and at the highest table. I think HR was not a seat, didn't have the seat there, right? They were told afterwards what the CFO and the CIO and the CEO decided, and maybe the president or the COO decided, and then they had to go implement it. So I think it's a journey, obviously. I think it's good news how much it has increased. Is it enough? Of course not, right? But it's going to take time. It's going to take more time. And I think the way to get there is to continue showing the value to the business, not just executing on kind of the bread and butter thing. Of course, you have to do that too. I think if you don't do that, you don't really have a more strategic play on that too. So if payroll gets messed up, I think nobody's going to ask you then to solve their biggest business problems if you're saying, well, people don't even get paid on time, right? So you have your lawsuit, an employment lawsuit or something like that. You have that frequently if you're breaking kind of the law. Of course, you need to still do that. But if you need to move upwards that curve as well. And that's what we talked about in systemic HR.
That makes sense. And that makes sense. Figure out your table stakes and then continue to grow. And I love this quote here before we move on to the next slide where it said HR should not just be close to the business. HR is the business. Like those 4 words are key to everything. HR is the business, right?
Yes.
You can't run the organization without folks.
Exactly. I love that. I love that quote too. And I think it's also a mindset shift for us in HR that we have to think about. Not just how do we support the business? How are we the business? How can we make business decisions? How can we weigh in on product decisions, on location decisions, on kind of customer decisions, client decisions, market decisions, operating model decisions, rather than just saying, I'll do the recruiting around it, or I'll do the training around it. How do we become more the business? I think it's a really important mindset shift. And that really goes with how the CHRO role has changed as well. So it used to be that the CHRO was the lead of the HR function. So they were talking about compliance, they were managing the HR function, they were taking in business decisions and then reacting on it, supporting the business basically. And they were mostly process oriented, respected for just their HR expertise, because that's kind of what they were known for. And now with systemic HR, the CHRO really becomes this kind of C-suite executives, as we talked about, and not just by title, but really by function as well, where they're thinking about the business outcomes overall, where they're weighing in on business strategy, business consulting, where they're also, and that's a really important consideration, where they're being the C-suite executive, but then they also have to coach the C-suite as well. So they have to be the player and coach, which nobody else on the C-suite has to do. If you think about it, the CFO doesn't have to coach anybody, their boss, the CEO, right? But the CHRO, at the same time as they're leading there, they also have to coach everybody. They have to tell the CIO, hey, for example, you have some issues in how you are working with your team, or how you're working with the CEO, or that this is not working in terms of the collaboration, or whatever it is, right? So they have to continuously coach them as well. So this player coach is a really complicated thing that the CHRO has to do as well. But and they have to focus a lot more on the relationships that they have with the C-suite as well, not just on the relationships that they have down in their own organization, but how do they continue to be seen and perform as this C-suite executive as well.
It is a lot, but I love the shift, right? And I think the words matter. HR service delivery and support to being that holistic executive. I think that is such a great way to think about it. You know, service delivery is absolutely what we thought. Check the box, deliver this program, make sure you're compliant, do the policies, right? To moving to that player coach role, that bigger responsibility of looking at holistically what does the organization need instead of being one cog in a wheel.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And so how do you get there? Let me, I think I want to jump a little bit ahead through some of these slides, because I think I want to kind of get to some of the insights that we got, how you got there too. But here's just what we found out about who the CHROs are. And this is, again, based on 20,000 CHRO profiles that we analyzed. So it's a lot of profiles, who they are, most of them female, which is maybe not surprising, right? 69% are women. Most of them are pretty mature in their career. So the biggest age group is the group from 50 to 59. The average age is 50. 73%, 3 and 4 are what we call career CHROs. So we'll unpack what we mean by that in a minute. Very highly educated. So lots of them have master's or doctoral degrees. So, and almost everybody, I think 98% have a bachelor's degree. So very highly educated. International experience, very important, not very easy to come by in the US, but in other geographies, it's very common to have international experience. So experience from other countries than your home country, basically, or the country where you're working in. It doesn't mean experience outside of the US, of course, necessarily if you're not US based. So I'm always saying that. Right. So a very important consideration as well, because it gets you this cultural competence. Non-HR business experience, so outside of HR business experience, only 1 in 4 have that. That's low overall. So it's not very high. It's not very high. And if you think about HR being the business, you want to have some other business experience as well. And the most frequent kind of domain expertise is talent management. So 41% have talent management experience. Certainly, many of them have HR business partner, or HR kind of that kind of experience, more broader experience as well, but from a domain expertise. That's what we see here. And we can dive deeper on which ones the high performing ones have as well. But maybe we want to talk about what's the paths, what are these paths to the CHRO. And by the way, you can download this report as well. So you see the link here on our site. We made this publicly available. It's chock full of all of these insights and discussions here.
Yeah, this is just a little teaser, right? Just a little snippet of all of the information that's in there.
Exactly. It's just a little teaser. So let me talk about how do you get to be a CHRO, because I know this is really important for many of you. Might be listening in, and you might be maybe on your path to CHRO. You want to become a CHRO, want to understand what their CHRO path could look like. So we categorize the CHRO role and the path to it into 4 different tracks. So the first one is what we call a career CHRO. The career CHRO is a person that moves from company to company in higher and higher roles, basically, within the HR profession, in order to make it eventually to the CHRO role. So it could be that you start basically in maybe one of the domains. Maybe you start in talent management, for example, as we see here. Then maybe you get go to another company, you get to a higher level HR business partner role. Then maybe you go to another company and you get to an even higher level, maybe another functional role. And then eventually you'll get to maybe lead a major business unit in terms of the HR area. And then eventually you'll be the CHRO. And then you move around to maybe bigger companies in order to basically stay in a CHRO role. And I will tell you, and you saw this before, 3 and 4 CHROs actually got to it like that. So very common that you have to move it within from company to company, which helps you build kind of this cross-company competence and experience, but it also leaves behind the relationships that you built, for example, in one organization, and the business knowledge that you built on how does this company actually make money, how does it operate, how does the business actually work as well. So that's a little bit of the drawbacks on that. Second one is what we call the company CHRO, much less frequent. So company CHROs are those CHROs that stay within one company and work their way up basically within the company, within the HR function, and finally they get to the CHRO role. Has some really high profile CHROs that are operating like that. We have a great podcast, for example, on one of the CHROs that you saw quoted here as well, Anne Christian van der Tank from TomTom. He has worked all of his career basically at TomTom, and he moved up in the HR organization until he got to be the CHRO. Some others are like that too, but much less frequent. So much less frequent to actually move that. So if you want to be a CHRO, most of the time you have to leave your company and go somewhere else. So this like internally focused kind of view and the experience that you have within the business is sometimes not valued as much as it should be. And then we have 2 that are actually outside of HRO, of the HR function, that get, we call that the business CHRO, which is somebody who might come from marketing or sales, like Lauren Schuster, for example, that I mentioned before, from the Lego Group, who comes from a marketing background, and he worked in Google and marketing, and then he came to Lego to lead kind of some of their marketing and business environment, and then he was asked to take on the HR function. Sometimes that also happens because people complain. We were working with a very large tech company, and the European leader there said, I talked with him and asked him, how did he get to be the CHRO here? And he said, well, I was always complaining about HR. And then so the CEO asked me to fix it. And so he said, you fix it now. You're always complaining about it. And sometimes that's great because it gets you kind of this outside of HR business experience. But then oftentimes these CHROs, they come in and they think it's pretty easy and straightforward. Yeah. And then they come in and they say, oh my God, it's so complicated. I had no idea. So that's like when you have to support them with a good team, with a strong team that has this HR background in order to amplify and support them on that. And the last one that we also talked about is what we call the operations CHRO. So that's somebody also coming from a non-HR business side. They might come from operations, for example. They might come from administration. They might come from maybe legal or compliance. Yeah. We call that the operations CHRO. Yeah. So you see some of those people too. And sometimes that's a great move if you have kind of operational issues that the HR function has, or if you need kind of legal expertise. Sometimes that happens too. Much less frequent, of course, as well.
Yeah. I've worked for 2 folks who have come from the legal organization and moved into the CHRO role. One, really good. One, not so great. It was just a very limiting perspective, and looking at it from a risk perspective is very different. So yeah,
it's very different. Yeah, and it's exactly it really depends, of course, also on the orientation of the person as well. So if they can take kind of this broader perspective as well, and also I think how much are they willing to learn about what HR is really about? I think that's really key for those last 2, the business CHRO and the operations CHRO. So as we're looking into how many are there in terms of each of them, I already talked about on the left-hand side, you see CHROs in all organizations that we studied. So career CHROs, the most common one. Mm-hmm. And then you have about 17% of company CHROs and about 8% of business CHROs and 2% of operations CHROs, kind of as I had expected to. So vast majority you move around between these companies. If you look at the high performers, those that are most systemic, the most high performing HR organizations that they lead, it's about the same percentage of the career CHROs, but business CHROs are actually a lot more percentage-wise. So what that means is that lots of times the people that come from the business side probably have the best kind of setup in terms of support from the CEO and some relationships with other C-suite executives, and also support from their team in order to amplify and support them on the HR practice. And then they can move kind of the business forward with their HR organization. So a little bit more that they are most successful. And I think what that means also, if you're in HR right now and you're trying to move into a CHRO role internally, build those executive relationships. Every opportunity that you can get to work with anybody on the C-suite or on their direct reports teams, any interaction with them, build those relationships because they're going to help you grow and amplify also your performance as a CHRO.
Love it.
That's a little bit of what we're seeing here. I know we're always looking at about how many are kind of female and how many are what does it look like from a diversity perspective. So from a like how many percent of them are female versus male, we already saw that 68% of all CHROs, or 69% actually of all CHROs are female. But as you look into, for example, the career CHROs, there's even more higher percentage of females. So 78% of them are female. What it means is if you're a woman and you want to become a CHRO, you have to move around even more so within like across organizations. Like it or not, it just seems that men have a better chance to be promoted from within. And I think it has to do with the relationships that they are supported on establishing within the organization. So they are seen more as a candidate for the CHRO role as well.
Fair.
So
I'm watching the time, Kathi. We've got about 10 minutes left. What do we want to make sure we focus on in these last 10 minutes to make sure we get, and we can just talk really, really fast. But I don't know if there's other things that we want to make sure to cover to give folks some ideas on what their journey could look like.
Yeah, I'd love to actually focus on kind of getting our next poll out, and then also talking about maybe kind of what giving them a really specific kind of tool and support system on what you can do tactically speaking, and also address your questions. So if you have any questions, please, or comments, please let us know in the chats. So maybe we'll move to the next poll. And as we are actually talking about, and we talked a lot about how CHROs have to have a more kind of data-based, fact-based, analytical approach. We see certain things that, for example, the high level of degrees that we talked about. Yeah. We saw that educational pathways, actually, there's not one clear educational pathway. So most CHROs actually don't have an HR degree. Only 15% of CHROs have an HR degree. And that's degrees like political science or accounting or finance, economics, legal, psychology, sociology, for example, that actually make almost a bigger impact sometimes than the HR degree. So from these degree perspectives, really interesting insights. As we think about like what functional areas of HR we see here is talent acquisition is the most successful, the most correlated to high performance, which I found very interesting. But if you think about talent acquisition can be a very strategic inside out, outside in kind of function. If you think about it, right, very connected to other disciplines as well, and to the business as well, can be very business focused. So talent acquisition experience really key on like being a high performing CHRO. Outside HR, outside of HR business experience, consulting very, very highly correlated with high performance, which might make sense. Because the CHRO in systemic HR is kind of this consultant, this business consultant, but IT also very highly correlated, because I think, and it goes back to the point that I mentioned earlier, you need to understand technology now. You can't just say technology is not for me. We have a great actually question here. How many years on average does it take to advance to a CHRO position? Well, you saw the average age of CHROs is 50. So on average, it takes about most of the CHROs actually, maybe I'll go to that slide too. If I can, it's kind of hard to move through here. Maybe we go to a poll and I'll answer that.
We'll work on that one, yeah. But I mean, if you do the math, right, what is it, 25 to 30 years is kind of that.
Yeah, exactly. Right? We have very limited, like only, and I can look at that, only 11% are under 40. So most of them take at least like 20 years, 28 years on average to get to a CHRO position. So it takes a lot of time because it's such a complex role.
And it may shorten, we don't know, with how quickly things are moving. Maybe everything kind of gets condensed and as the role continues to change as well. So let's look at this poll question, and then we'll talk about how you may be able to get into that next step yourself. So how are you currently prioritizing your own upskilling and learning to grow your own HR career? Do you have a personal development plan, pursuing learning opportunities? I know a lot of people, I have a board of directors, right? Surround ourselves with people who help us to continue to think differently. I occasionally take courses or attend events, but don't have a formal plan. Rely mostly on the job experience to build new skills. My org provides structured learning and I follow that. Or I just really don't have time, or other reasons that I'm not prioritizing my own upskilling. So would love to hear how you fall into that. Kathi, where do you think folks are going to land? What do you think is going to come up as the top one?
I would say it's probably they rely mostly on the job experience to build new skills because of the constraints. And I mean, it's so busy and so many things are happening. And honestly, you can learn a lot of things on the job as well, but you need to be intentional on that too. So how can you learn on the job without because if you're not intentional about it, you're just going to do whatever you've done before, right? And you might not learn a lot of new things.
All right, Tony, what do we have? Let's flip to our responses. Hopefully folks have had a chance to weigh in.
Okay, occasionally Okay, well, that's interesting.
That's much bigger than I expected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I like about this is that everybody has some kind of, for the most part, some kind of development journey, whether it's organic or whether it is planned. Folks are continuing to learn and to grow. And I would say, just as my 2 cents, that if you're not figuring out some way to learn something new every day, that may be a mistake, because the world is changing. As we saw in the beginning, the world is changing so fast. You've got to make sure that you're continuing to feed your brain, give yourself new things to think about, and making sure that you're continuing to expand how you think about things. So,
yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's very telling that actually nobody says my organization provides structured learning and I follow that, which makes me sad. But it's consistent what we saw in our systemic HR study, where we saw that only 8% of organizations actually provide structured learning for HR professionals specifically. So, and if you're not, it is also consistent with many of these CHROs being career CHROs, because if you don't plan for the succession of your CHRO within your organization, guess what? You're not going to find them.
You get what you get, and you can't have a fit if you don't have a plan for it.
Exactly. So,
all right, we've got about 5 minutes left. What do we want to flip to?
Let's go to like the tool. I want to give you a tool of what you can do actually yourself with like a tool basically for your own career, but unfortunately it's kind of stuck. Tony, I can't move it. It's kind of spinning here. It's
And here's
spinning
exactly what I
here.
think we need to do is I think we need to plan an entire day workshop. We have so much
I
content. We have
agree.
so many things
Yeah.
we haven't talked about. So I'm
So
going to
so
get
many
with my
things
team
about.
and you get with yours and see how we can plan just a longer time to get more questions and discussions and cover even half of the material that we had today. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, okay, now it's actually
there
moving
we
again, but
go.
it's moving very slowly. So I hope I can go there. What I'm going to show you, and what I want to really show you the slide and give you the link for this too, is what we call the HR Career Navigator, which is a tool that we developed, and it's a free tool that we developed from the Bersin company together with Eightfold. That is amazing for you. So you can basically go in, you upload your resume, you basically tell the system what you want to do, where you want to go, if you want to be a CHRO, and then it gives you suggestions based on your resume. It tells you basically, it infers for you where you are in each of these HR capabilities that I talked about, like these 96 capabilities. And it also gives you suggestions basically on where you might want to go as an HR professional. So it gives you kind of next steps, areas where you could go. You can tune that as well. And we're gonna here. It's already
Got
here.
the
So
link in there.
Sue already put it in, which is
Thanks,
great.
Sue.
And thank you, Sue. I'm moving slowly
It's really
through this. Here
slow.
it is.
There we
Here
go.
it is. Here it is. It took a long time, but here's the link, and here's also to scan the HR Career Navigator. And it's amazing because you can actually see next steps. Basically, it's going to give you all this whole career ladder, and then it also gives you a suggestion on what mentors you might want to connect to in this platform. And there's thousands of people already in there, CHROs, high-level leaders, but then also people earlier in their career. And you can reach out to them and connect with them. Many of them are happy to mentor you and give you feedback on what this means. And it also gives you connection to basically courses and programs and all of that. So it's just a great, really personalized tool to help you with your own career. Yeah, so it suggests and mentors are so critical for that. So, yeah.
So what a great segue to what I was actually, we only have a couple minutes left, but I'll tell you, so my TA career, I was in TA for a long time, as Tony shared when we first started. And I've worked with a lot of different CHROs, and I would love to just tell you two quick stories about CHROs that have really been impactful for me and what to look for in those folks. So I went to a company, third largest home shopping network in the country. Oh, Kathi, they were a hot mess. But I wanted to work for the CHRO. I wanted to work for Jamie. So I decided to come into the organization to work for her. She was fair. She gave me great advice on how to do things. She never jumped in and did them for me. We were a really small, lean team. I said I wanted to take on this new project. And she said, I don't have the bandwidth. I'm like, great. Can I do it? She said, absolutely. We spent a lot of time working together. It was something I only had tangentially worked on in the past, right? Doing a competency project for the entire organization so that I could then tie it to interview guides and make sure we were bringing in the right people. She was awesome. And so I so appreciated the ability to work with someone who said, yes, I trust you. Do this. Come to me with help. She's amazing. She is now the Chief People Officer for Trimble. She's fantastic. And another CHRO that is still my mentor to this day is MK, who I worked for at P.F. Chang's. He from the start knew that he made sure I knew that he had my back. When I accepted the offer, he said, thanks for taking the leap with me. I'm going to do everything in my power to make you successful. He was very transparent. We've had situations where somebody came and complained about me, and he's like, well, go talk to her. And then gave me the opportunity to say, hey, what do you want to do? What does your plan look like? Come back with the plan. He's like, I love it. That's why you're in charge. That's why we do this. So support and transparency and trust from these two leaders have stuck with me from, my whole entire career on working with leaders who really have your back. Trust and transparency is huge. So find mentors, find folks that can pour into you, give you that support and confidence, but also allow you to do your own thing. Learn fast, fail fast as well. So just a few seconds left. Kathi, what do we want to wrap up with? We're on the Career Navigator slide. Anything else we need to share before Tony yanks us off of the stage?
Yeah, no, I think this was so fun, Rebecca. So thanks for the great conversation. So much more to unpack, of course. But check out the Career Navigator, and I think for the really, whether you want to be a CHRO, an HR leader, or maybe you're looking at other careers, really be clear about where you want to go, decide where you want to go, and take every minute of the day to learn. Basically, I think you said it really well, Rebecca, to constantly learn and develop, learn on the job, learn learn with free resources, all of those kind of things.
Ask the questions and dive in.
Ask the question.
Okay,
Be curious.
Right to the very last second, we're going to flip it back to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kathi. Before we go, we just have some closing announcements to share with you. And we want to let you know that this webinar is sponsored by Eightfold AI. Eightfold AI's market-leading talent intelligence platform helps organizations retain top performers, upskill and reskill their workforce, recruit talent efficiently, and reach diversity goals. Eightfold's patented deep learning artificial intelligence platform is available in more than 155 countries and 24 languages, enabling cutting-edge enterprises to transform their talent into a competitive advantage. For more information, visit eightfold.ai. Next, we want to provide you with info regarding the SHRM PDC you've earned for viewing today's program. You can claim your credit by entering the number you see on your screen. You'll also receive a post-event email with this code as well. Regardless of the type of recertification you are pursuing, please keep track of the SHRM webinars you may be claiming for research credit. And with that, we are going to bring today's webinar to a close. We'll be closing the program window in the next 45-ish seconds. You have that time to take down the SHRM activity code for your PDC, or download the program slides or the additional resources from your session agenda. In a post-webinar email, you'll also receive a link to complete a post-webinar survey. We hope you'll take a moment to fill out that survey. It helps us assess this event and plan for future ones. Before we sign off, we want to thank our presenters, Kathi Enderes from the Josh Bersin Company and Rebecca Warren from Eightfold AI, for all of the actionable information and thought leadership they've shared today. Finally, we want to thank you, our audience, for tuning in and for choosing SHRM for HR webinars. That concludes today's program.
Take care.